the arrival of the princess. The human man stepped into the great alien hall, his boots echoing on the shining stone floor. The walls stretched high, carved with glowing lines that looked like rivers of light. Strange eyes followed him, some curious, some filled with laughter. He felt small under the weight of so many stares, but he kept his head high. He was the only human here, and that fact alone made him stand out like a lone tree in a desert. The court was filled with nobles dressed in bright silks, their long ears twitching as they whispered to each other. The smell of burning incense drifted through the air, sweet but heavy. Guards stood like statues, their armor shining gold and black. Musicians played soft strings that hummed like wind through glass. And at the far end of the hall, raised on a high platform, sat the alien princess. She was beautiful, with sharp silver eyes that seemed to pierce the air itself. Her crown shimmered like a circle of stars. She looked down on the human, her lips curling into a playful, almost cruel smile. The nobles around her leaned closer, waiting for her to speak. She did not disappoint them. "So this is the human," she said, her voice ringing across the hall. "Look at him. He cannot even bow correctly. His tongue must stumble worse than his feet." Laughter spread like fire through the crowd. The human felt heat rise in his chest, but he did not look away. He had faced worse things than laughter, and he would not break so easily. He bowed again, slower this time, his eyes locked on hers. "I greet the court," he said in steady words, but his accent made the alien syllables sound strange, and the princess laughed again. "You hear it? Do you not?" she asked her court. "He speaks like a child learning for the first time, every word twisted, every note broken." The nobles clapped their hands, amused by her sharp tongue. The human clenched his fists at his side but forced himself to stay calm. Inside, his heart beat fast. Anger, shame, and something deeper mixed together. Why had he been called here only to be mocked? What game was this court playing? The princess rose from her throne and walked down the steps with slow grace. Every noble's eyes followed her as if the room itself bent around her presence. Her long dress whispered against the floor, glittering. With silver threads, she circled the human like a predator playing with prey, her voice soft now but every word sharp. "Tell me, human, do you even understand us? Or do you only nod and hope we believe?" The hall laughed again, but not as loudly. Something in the human's eyes held their attention. He stood firm, letting her words fall like stones into a river. He did not answer her mockery. Not yet, because deep inside, he held a secret. A secret that could turn every laugh in this room into silence. But for now, he played the part of the quiet outsider. He listened as she teased. He heard the whispers of the nobles. Why is he here? He cannot last long. Perhaps he will be thrown out before sunset. Still, he said nothing. He only bowed once more, deeper this time, and the princess's silver eyes narrowed. She was not used to prey that stood unshaken. "Perhaps we should test him," one noble suggested loudly. "Yes," another agreed. "Let us see if humans can do more than stumble with words." The hall buzzed with excitement. The princess smiled again, but there was something sharper now in her gaze. "Very well," she said softly. "We shall see what this human is made of." The human lifted his eyes, calm and steady. He did not know what test awaited him. But one thing was clear. The mocking laughter was only the beginning. The real trial was yet to come. And when it arrived, he would show them that a human was not so easily broken. In that moment, as the crowd whispered and the princess smirked, the hall did not yet know that soon, the human's voice would freeze every smile in the room, not because of weakness, but because of strength hidden in the very thing they mocked. His words. The hall was still buzzing with whispers. The human stood in the center, a single figure against a sea of alien nobles. The princess circled him like a hawk circling prey, her silver eyes shining with amusement, her lips curled into another sharp smile. "Tell me, human," she said, her voice echoing. "Can you even pronounce our sacred names? Or will you stumble again and make us laugh?" The nobles leaned forward, waiting, eager for another mistake. The human's heart beat faster, but his face stayed calm. He had been mocked. Before on Earth and in far-off colonies, but here, The laughter carried venom. It was meant to break him, and yet he carried something none of them expected. The princess tilted her head. "Repeat after me," she commanded, her voice sweet but sharp. She spoke a word in her native tongue, long, flowing, like music. It was the name of her royal line, a name whispered only with respect. She said it slowly, letting every noble enjoy the moment. Everyone knew the human would fail. Everyone waited for his tongue to twist and his voice to stumble. The hall grew quiet. Dozens of eyes burned into him. The human closed his eyes for a breath, remembering long nights long ago. Ruins in the desert, carvings on walls, the sound of an old trader teaching him secret words. He remembered how hard he worked, how he repeated those sounds until his throat ached, and now with calm strength he spoke. The word flowed from his lips, not broken, not twisted, but perfect, sharp, and clear. The sound rolled across the hall like thunder. The nobles froze, the laughter died at once, and the princess's smile vanished from her face. For a moment, silence ruled the hall. Even the musicians stopped playing, their hands trembling on strings. The human opened his eyes and looked straight at the princess, her lips parted slightly, her eyes wide with disbelief. She stepped back, as if struck by an unseen force. "You," she whispered, her voice shaking. "You speak our tongue?" The nobles gasped. It was not possible, they told themselves. No human had ever spoken their sacred language. It was hidden, taught only to nobles and priests, and yet this human had spoken it without flaw, as if he had been born among them. The silence turned heavy, the weight of 100 stares pressed down on him. Whispers started again, soft at first. Impossible. Blasphemy. No. Prophecy. The princess's silver eyes narrowed. Her playful mask was gone. Now she looked at him as if seeing him for the first time, not as a fool, not as prey, but as something dangerous, something forbidden. "Who taught you this?" she demanded. Her voice rang sharp, cutting the air like a blade. The human stood tall, his face unreadable. "I listened," he said simply. That was all. And yet those words shook the nobles even more. The princess clenched her hands. Her heart pounded. In her chest, she had meant only to humiliate him, but instead he had humiliated her in front of the entire court. Still, she could not look away. There was something in his voice. Something that stirred a strange fear and curiosity inside her. One of the nobles cried out, "This is a trick, a crime. A human cannot speak the tongue of kings." Another noble hissed, "He must be punished before the gods curse us all." Voices rose, filling the hall with anger and fear, but under it all was wonder, the kind of wonder that made the skin crawl. The human said nothing more. He stood like a rock in a storm, letting their fear and fury wash against him. The princess raised her hand, and the hall fell silent once again, her eyes locked onto his. "You will answer me later," she said in a low, trembling tone. "But know this, human. If you dare speak those words again without my command, it will cost you your life." The crowd murmured in awe at her warning. The human bowed slightly, his face calm, but inside, he knew something had changed. He was no longer just the outsider. Mocked for his accent, now he was a mystery, a danger, and perhaps a key. The nobles watched him with new eyes, some afraid, some angry, some whispering of destiny. And the princess, though her face showed strength, could not forget the sound of her sacred language spoken in his voice. It had shaken her deeper than she wanted to admit. As the human was led away by guards, the hall still buzzing with unease, the princess remained frozen at the center, her mind burning with one question that refused to leave. How could a human know the words of her bloodline? And, though she would never say it aloud, her heart whispered something else, something dangerous. Why does his voice stay in my chest, like it belongs there? The human was led out of the great hall by armored guards. Their footsteps echoed in the long corridor, cold and heavy. He walked between them with calm steps, his hands loose at his side. But inside, his mind turned like storm clouds. He had revealed too much, too early, and now every noble in that court wanted to know who he truly was. The corridor twisted into narrow passages lit with pale blue fire. The walls were carved with alien script, words of power, words of history. He read them in silence. Each curve of the letters was familiar to him. It was a strange comfort. This place of strangers spoke a language he had once carried in secret. The guards pushed him into a chamber with tall stone pillars. The air was cool, heavy with the smell of metal and smoke. One guard spoke in a low voice. "You will wait here until the court decides your fate." The door closed with a deep clang, and the human was left in silence. But the silence did not last. Soft footsteps echoed in the corner. From behind a curtain stepped a young alien servant, her eyes wide, her voice trembling. "You should not have spoken those words," she whispered. "They are sacred, forbidden, to outsiders." The human tilted his head, his calm gaze steady. "And yet, I spoke them," he said softly. The servant shivered, glancing nervously at the door. "If the nobles decide you are a threat, they will end you before dawn." Her voice shook, but some whisper that you may be the one the prophecy spoke of. The human frowned slightly. "Prophecy?" he asked. The servant nodded, her hands trembling as she clutched the fabric of her robe. "Long ago it was said, an outsider would come. A voice not born of our blood would speak the tongue of kings. And when that voice was heard, our world would change forever." The words hung heavy in the air. The human said nothing, but his heart stirred. So that was why they feared him. Not because of the word itself, but because of what the word meant. The servant leaned closer, her voice a whisper of fear. "The princess will question you, but know this. She fears you now. And when nobles fear, they strike." Her eyes darted to the door again. "I should not be here. If they catch me speaking to you, it will be my death." Then she vanished back into the shadows as quickly as she had come. The human sat on the cold stone bench. He closed his eyes, letting the silence return. But outside the chamber, the palace buzzed with voices, whispers in hidden halls, shadows trading rumors like poisoned coins. Did you hear him speak? It was flawless. No human could do such a thing. Perhaps the gods sent him, or perhaps he is a curse to be purged. The princess walked through her private hall, her mind burning. She ignored the nobles who tried to follow her, ignored the guards asking if she was well. Her thoughts were filled with the sound of his voice. The word he spoke had struck her deeper than she admitted. It was not only perfect, it was powerful. As if the voice of her ancestors had risen from a stranger's throat. She stopped by a window, staring out at the glowing city below, her hand pressed against the cold glass. "Why does his voice not leave me?" she thought. "Why do I feel my heart shake when I remember it?" Behind her, two nobles whispered, "He must be silenced before the people hear of this. If the prophecy is true, he could rise above us all." The princess turned sharply, her eyes like blades. "Enough," she snapped. "Leave me." The nobles bowed and scurried away, but their whispers continued down the halls, whispers of plots, whispers of fear, whispers that would soon turn into something sharper. Meanwhile, the human waited in his chamber, his mind calm, but his body tense. He knew they would not let him stay idle for long. They would test him, challenge him, and perhaps even try to destroy him, but he welcomed it. For deep inside, he carried a fire that no court could extinguish, the fire of survival, the fire of humanity. He had spoken their tongue, but that was only the beginning. The real battle was yet to come. As night fell, shadows moved through the palace. Some carried daggers, some carried secrets, and in the heart of it all, the princess could not sleep. Her mind replayed the sound of the human's voice again and again. She had mocked him once, but now she was no longer sure who was mocking whom, and, in the silence of her chamber, she whispered a single question into the night, a question that filled her with both fear and longing. "Who are you, human? And why does your voice feel like it belongs to me?" The next morning, the human was taken from his stone chamber. Guards marched on either side, their armor clinking like chains. The halls of the palace were darker now, shadows stretching long. It felt as though the entire place held its breath, waiting for something, and that something was him. The great court was filled again, but today the air was heavier. Nobles sat straighter, whispering less. The laughter of yesterday was gone, replaced with fear and curiosity. All eyes turned to the center where the human was led. The princess sat high on her throne, her face calm but her eyes sharp. Her silver gaze followed him like a blade, cold, steady, and unyielding. When the guard stepped back, the human stood alone again. The court master, an elder noble with a long silver robe, raised his voice. "This human has spoken words forbidden to his kind," he declared. "Today he will face trial. He will prove if he is a fraud, kind, or something more." The crowd murmured in agreement. The human's face remained calm, his shoulders straight. Inside, his heart beat strong but steady. He knew this was not just a trial, it was a trap, and yet, he would not show fear. The courtmaster gestured to a long stone tablet carried forward by servants. Upon it were etched lines of ancient verse, sacred words of their ancestors, verses only scholars and nobles were allowed to know. "Let him read." The elder noble said, "Let him speak the words of kings. If he fails, he is a liar. If he speaks true, then let the gods decide." The tablet was set before the human. The hall fell silent. Not a breath dared to rise. The human stepped closer, his eyes tracing the carved script. His mind flashed back to his childhood, to long nights in ruined deserts, to the old trader who whispered stories of a forgotten world, to the way he carved these very letters into sand until his fingers bled. This was not new to him. This was memory. He placed his hand gently on the stone, and then he spoke. The words rolled out smooth, like water flowing from a hidden spring, every syllable clear, every tone sharp and steady. It was not the broken tongue of a foreigner. It was the true speech of their ancestors, alive again in a human's voice. The nobles gasped. Some leaned forward in disbelief. Others turned pale. Even, the guards shifted uneasily where they stood. The human did not stop. He read the verses as though he had carried them his whole life. And in truth, he had. When the last word left his lips, silence gripped the hall like iron. The human looked up slowly, his eyes meeting the princess's. Her face was unreadable, but her hands were clenched tight on her throne. Her heart beat fast. She had expected a stumble, a mistake, but instead, he had spoken perfectly. No, more than perfectly. He had spoken with strength that even her own people sometimes failed to show. "Diao." Elder Noble's voice trembled as he spoke. "This cannot be. No human should know these words." Another shouted, "He is a danger. He must be silenced." The hall broke into chaos, voices rising like thunder. "Kill him. Test him again." "No, the prophecy. It is real." The princess rose from her throne. "Enough," she commanded, her voice cutting through the storm. The hall fell silent once more, all eyes turning to her. She stepped down slowly, her long dress trailing behind her like flowing water. Her silver eyes locked on the human. Every step was heavy with meaning. She stopped only a breath away from him, her voice low but sharp enough for all to hear. "You speak our words as if they are your own," she said. "Tell me, human, who are you really?" The human held her gaze, his own calm and steady. "I am what I have always been," he said softly. "A man who listens, a man who remembers." The princess's lips parted, but no words came. Her chest tightened at the sound of his voice. It carried weight, truth, and something that stirred deep within her. Something she could not control, something she dared not admit. The courtmaster cleared his throat nervously. "The first trial is complete. He has spoken true. The gods themselves must have guided his tongue." The nobles shifted uneasily, torn between fear and awe, and in the shadows of the hall, whispers rose again. Whispers of prophecy, whispers of change. The human stood tall, his eyes steady. He had passed their test, but he knew more were coming. Trials of word, of strength, of spirit. They would not stop until they broke him, or bowed before him. And as the princess turned away, hiding the storm in her chest, he knew one thing with certainty. This was only the beginning. The trial had ended, but the echoes of the human's voice still clung to the walls of the great court. The nobles whispered like restless birds, their words sharp with fear. Some demanded his death. Others called him chosen, but all agreed on one thing. Nothing was the same now. Not after the human had spoken the language of kings with such power. The princess sat on her throne, her body still and her face calm, but her heart was no longer steady. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard his voice again, strong, clear, and steady. The way it had struck through her mockery like a blade of fire. She had wanted to laugh at him. Instead, she found herself remembering the way her chest had tightened when he spoke. When the court was dismissed, she retreated to her private chambers. Silk curtains hid the tall windows, shutting out the bright sky. Golden lamps cast soft light, but it felt dim compared to the storm. Inside her, she sat at the edge of her bed, her fingers pressed against her lips. "Why do I feel this way?" She whispered to herself. He was only a human, an outsider, a man she had mocked with her own voice not long ago, and yet something inside her refused to let go of him. A servant entered quietly, bowing low. "My princess, the nobles ask if they may speak with you tonight." She waved her hand sharply. "No, leave me," she said, her voice colder than ice. The servant bowed again and slipped away. The princess was left alone, but her mind was not quiet. The whispers of the nobles rang. In her ears, "He is dangerous. He is the prophecy. He must be destroyed." She rose suddenly and paced the room, her long dress trailing behind her like ripples on water. She pressed her hands against the stone wall and looked out through a narrow slit. The city lights shimmered below, but in her heart, another light glowed. Strange, unwanted, and yet impossible to ignore. She remembered the way he stood before the court, unbowed, unbroken, even as laughter rained upon him. She remembered the silence that followed his voice and how it had silenced her. For the first time in years, her sharp tongue had failed her, and that frightened her more than any blade. Meanwhile, the human remained in his guarded chamber. He sat on the cold bench, his head leaning back against the stone. He had passed the first trial, but he knew more would come. The court would not rest until they either proved him false or bowed to him in fear. He closed his eyes, letting himself breathe. But deep inside, he felt something stir. The memory of the princess's eyes, silver and bright, eyes that had mocked him, but now seemed to carry something more, something she tried to hide. That night, the princess found no sleep. Her mind refused to rest. She rose from her bed and dressed herself in a plain, dark robe, no crown, no jewels, only the weight of her thoughts, and with quiet steps, she slipped out of her chamber. Her guards did not see her. She moved like a shadow through the halls. The corridor outside the human's chamber was guarded. 2 soldiers stood stiff, but she waved her hand and they stepped aside instantly. No one questioned the princess. She pushed, opened the door herself, and entered the dimly lit room. The human looked up from his bench. Surprise flickered in his eyes, but he did not rise. He only said, calm as always, "Princess." Her chest tightened at the sound of his voice. That voice, why did it move her so deeply? She drew the hood back from her face, revealing her silver eyes. For a long moment she said nothing. She only stared at him, studying the calm strength in his gaze, the same gaze that had not broken when she mocked him, the same gaze that had spoken, her sacred tongue without fear. Finally, she asked the question burning in her chest. "Who are you really?" The human's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. "I am who I have always been," he said softly. "A man who listens, a man who remembers." Her breath caught, those words again, the same ones he had spoken in the court, but now, in the silence of this chamber, they struck even deeper. She hated the way her heart skipped, hated the warmth that crept into her chest. He was a danger. She knew it. And yet, part of her did not want to see him destroyed. "You should not exist," she whispered, her voice trembling. "No human should know what you know. No human should sound like you sound." Her hand clenched into a fist at her side. "And yet, you do." The human's eyes never left hers. "You fear me," he said quietly, "but you also wonder why you cannot stop listening." Her breath caught again. She wanted to deny it, to strike him for his boldness, but she could not, because his words were true. The silence stretched between them, heavy, dangerous, and yet charged with something neither could name. Finally, she turned, sharply pulling her hood back over her head. "Tomorrow," she said coldly, though her voice shook, "you will face another trial. Be ready." She left without looking back, but her footsteps echoed fast and her heart beat even faster, because no matter how she tried to bury it, she could not escape the truth. The human was no longer just an outsider to her. He was a storm inside her chest, one she could not control. The palace was restless. Word of the human's flawless trial had spread like fire. Merchants in the markets whispered of him, servants in the kitchens spoke his name in hushed tones, and nobles argued in secret chambers. Some feared him, some wanted him destroyed, but some believed he was the outsider their ancestors had spoken of. The princess sat in council with her elders. They pressed her with urgent voices. "He is dangerous," one noble hissed. "If he can speak our words, what else might he know?" Another leaned forward, fear sharp in his eyes. "We must kill him before the people hear more. If they believe the prophecy is true, the court will lose its power." The princess listened but said nothing. Her mind was far away. She remembered the human's calm voice in the chamber last night, the way his words had pierced her, the way her chest had tightened. It unsettled her more than the prophecy itself. At last she raised her hand and silenced the council. "The human will face another trial," she declared, "but he will not be killed yet." Her tone was steady, but inside she trembled. She knew she was walking a dangerous line. Protecting him too openly would turn the nobles against her, and yet she could not bring herself to order his death. That night the human was brought into a different chamber. It was smaller than the grand hall, the walls lined with old books and carved tablets. Torches flickered, throwing shadows across the stone. The princess herself entered, dressed in silver robes that shimmered like moonlight. The guards bowed and stepped aside, leaving her alone with him. She studied him for a long moment before speaking. "Sit," she ordered softly. The human obeyed, lowering himself onto the stone bench, but his eyes never left hers. She hated how his gaze made her feel, like he could see deeper than anyone else ever had. "You will tell me now," she said, firmly. "How did you learn our tongue? Who taught you the words of my bloodline?" The human's voice was calm, almost gentle. "I learned from ruins long forgotten, in deserts where no nobles walk." He leaned back slightly, his eyes steady. "An old trader once carried your words with him. He spoke them to me as a child. I remembered even when no one else cared to listen." The princess's chest tightened. Ruins in the desert. Words of her ancestors passed in secret. It should have been impossible. But she heard no lie in his tone, and that frightened her more than anything. "You speak them better than some of my own people," she said bitterly. "Why? Why would a human cling to words that are not his?" The human's lips curved into the faintest shadow of a smile. "Because words are not just sound. They are memory. They are power." He leaned forward slightly, his eyes glinting in the torchlight. "And perhaps, princess, they are also bridges." Her breath caught at his boldness. No one had ever spoken to her like this. Not nobles, not guards, not even her teachers. And yet here was a human, daring to suggest that her language, her bloodline, could be a bridge. Her hands trembled slightly at her sides, hidden by her robes. "You speak as if you belong here," she whispered. "You don't." The human's voice softened. "Don't I? You feel it, don't you? The truth in my words. The same truth your people. Fear." Her silver eyes widened. She wanted to strike him, to silence him, but instead she found herself stepping closer. Closer than she should. Her heart pounded, her voice dropped to a whisper. "If the court believes you are the prophecy, they will try to use you, or kill you." She hesitated, then added almost against her will. "And I don't know which I should let them do." The human tilted his head. For the first time his gaze softened. "You are torn," he said quietly, "between duty to your court and something else you cannot name." Her breath caught again. His words were too close, too sharp, like he had spoken the very thing she feared to admit even to herself. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. The princess felt her heart race. Her mind screamed that this was wrong, but her chest ached with something she could not control. She turned sharply, her silver hair swinging like a blade. Enough, she snapped, though her voice trembled. You will face the next trial tomorrow, and if you fail, I will not protect you. The human only bowed his head slightly. As you wish, princess, he said calmly. But his eyes followed her as she left the chamber, and though her back was straight and her steps were sharp, she could not hide the truth from herself. His voice lingered in her heart, and it terrified her more than any prophecy. The dawn rose pale over the alien city. The palace bells rang, calling the court once again. Guards moved quickly. Servants whispered nervously. Everyone knew today would decide the fate of the human. Would he live as a symbol, or die as a threat? The great hall filled with nobles dressed in their brightest colors. Their voices clashed like storm waves. He must be silenced, shouted one. He is the prophecy, argued another. But all of them waited for one person to decide. The princess. The human was brought in, his hands bound with silver rope, yet he walked calmly, his eyes steady. He looked neither broken nor afraid, and that alone unsettled the nobles. He carried himself like a man who already knew the outcome. Whether life or death, he would not bow to fear. The princess sat on her high throne, her crown gleaming like a circle of stars. Her face was cold, unreadable, but inside her chest, her heart pounded painfully. She remembered his voice in the chamber, the way he had spoken of words as bridges, the way her own breath had caught against her will, and now she had to judge him. In front of all, she had to choose. The courtmaster raised his staff, his voice booming. The human has passed 2 trials. He has spoken the words of kings. He has recited the sacred verse. Today, he stands for judgment. His fate rests with the princess. The hall grew silent. Every noble leaned forward, waiting. The human lifted his head and met her eyes. He did not plead. He did not beg. He only looked at her, calm and steady. And something inside her cracked. She rose slowly, her silver robe shimmering in the torchlight. Her steps echoed as she descended the throne. She walked across the hall until she stood only a breath away from him. Her voice was steady, but inside it trembled. You have spoken the words of my ancestors, she said. You have passed every test given to you, though no human should be able to, the nobles murmured, some nodding, some frowning. The princess's eyes locked onto his. And now I must decide if you are a danger or something greater. The human spoke softly so only she could truly hear. Whatever you choose, princess, you already know the truth. Her heart tightened. Yes, she did know. He was not just a danger. He was a storm that had shaken her world, and part of her, though she hated to admit it, did not want the storm to end. She turned to the nobles, her voice rising like steel. This human is no fraud, she declared. He is no thief of words. He is a man who has listened, who has remembered, and whether you fear him or not, you cannot deny what you have seen. Gasps filled the hall. Some nobles shouted in anger. Others bowed their heads in reluctant respect. The courtmaster raised his staff again, but princess, if he is truly the prophecy, then he is beyond our control. The princess's voice rang sharp. Then perhaps it is not control we need, perhaps it is respect. Silence followed, heavy and sharp. No one dared argue further. The weight of her words had struck them like thunder. The human bowed his head slightly, not out of defeat but in acknowledgement. You honor me, he said softly. His voice carried strength but also warmth, and the sound of it struck her chest again. She hated how much she wanted to hear it again. She turned quickly, hiding the heat in her eyes. Your life is spared, she declared. But know this, your place in this court is not yet secure. Many still fear you, and fear breeds enemies. The nobles whispered among themselves. Some looked at him with awe, others with hatred, but none dared laugh at him again. Not after today. As the human was led from the hall, the princess remained standing, her hands tight at her sides, her heart burning with a storm she could not control. Respect, fear, and something more twisted inside her, something she dared not name. When the hall finally emptied and she was alone, she whispered into the silence, "Why does your voice not leave? Me, human? Why does it feel like it belongs here? With me?" Her words vanished into the empty air, but deep in her heart, she already knew the answer. Because no matter what the court decided, no matter what the prophecy claimed, her world had changed the moment he spoke her tongue.